Currently, the pack runs off a backup battery system, which has required periodic maintenance over the past 12 years since installation. The construction group recommended installation of a backup generator for the new cafeteria. Mr. McLaughlin indicated that would be determined whether this could be done while staying within the budget by structuring the bid specifications to include this item as an alternate, which would stand alone in the bid submissions. The items that are up for approval tonight are 1 through 3 are standing items. 4 is professional development. 5 is the sale of Chromebooks. 6 is the approval of field trip destinations. 7 is a donation from the WAMS PTO for staff wish list items. Thank you to the WAMS PTO for that. 8 is a donation from the Bernard's PEC for the summer fun program that happened this past summer, so thank you to the PEC for that donation. 9 is for parental transportation contract for an out-of-district placement, and 10 through 15 are special education services. Questions?
I do have a question.
Shoot.
The construction at the high school, until we've approved rotating drop schedule, I'm not sure I agree with initiating construction. Architectural design even, I would question until the board says, yes, we are going to go with rotating drop schedule.
So where my understanding at this point is that we are looking to do rotating drop schedule, and that's the first priority that's being worked on right now, is to make a mock schedule. And the goal is to have that draft schedule done with our student information system provider before the board is asked to commit to construction. That's the goal.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne.
I'm going to have a little trouble voting this time, so yes on 1 through 9, and I'm going to abstain on 10 through 15 per our earlier meeting.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Salmon.
Yes.
Mrs. White.
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond.
Yes.
Mrs. Korn.
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge.
Yes.
Mrs. McCune.
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. We're up to personnel. There's 26 items. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. Gray and Mrs. Wooldridge. The last items are on the addendum sheet. Make sure that you have looked at that. The Personnel Committee met last week on Friday. We discussed a whole lot of personnel matters, which we can't report out in public. And let's see if there's anything I can report out on. Yeah, we discussed a whole number of different issues, some professional development, which a couple of things that were on the agenda, I think. And we looked at dates and times for the rest of the meetings for this year, the next 3 months, and came up with times that work for all of us. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the agenda items? No? Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne.
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Salmon.
Yes.
Mrs. White.
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond.
Yes.
Mrs. Korn.
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge.
Yes.
Mrs. McCune.
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. And Mr. Markarian just pointed out to me that a number of the professional development items on the agenda are paid for by grant, which I forgot to say. Okay, so we're up to
Policy, right?
policy.
Woo-hoo.
Okay,
Get
let's
ready.
go for it.
Hold on to your hats, everybody. It's going to be exciting. So I'm going to read through the first reading stuff first, and then go back to the discussion stuff after, all right? So the following are going to be, the following policies are going to be for first reading, for approval for first reading. We have the policy 3159, teaching staff member school district reporting responsibilities, and this was mandated by the state. The policy was amended for a new law. If the Board of Ed determines a teaching staff member failed to report or self-report any allegations of child abuse in accordance with the state law of regulation, the board must submit a report to the New Jersey State Board of Examiners. The New Jersey State Board of Examiners will review the report to determine if the lack of teaching staff members' failure to report warrants revocation or suspension of their teaching certificate. So that is the mandate for that one. So there's the policy and regulation 3218 and policy and regulation 4218. They're all use, possession, or distribution of substances. And these were revised and they're all mandated by the state as well. So it says teaching and support staff members shall be required to submit to an immediate medical examination to include a substance test if the teaching or support staff member supervisor has reasonable suspicion to believe a teaching or support staff member is under the influence of a substance during work hours or at a school-sponsored function where the support staff member or teacher has been assigned job responsibilities. New language added to strengthen the board's position is if a teacher or a support staff member refuses to consent to the medical examination, including a substance test, it will be determined to be positive result for substances if they refuse to take the test. In the event the results of the medical examination and substance tests are not provided to the superintendent, so they take a test, they don't provide us with the test results, within 24 hours or as soon as the test results are available, it will be deemed a positive result for substances, and the teaching or support staff member shall be subject to appropriate discipline. Policy and Regulation 6112, which is reimbursement of federal or other grant expenditures, which is revised and it's also mandated. There's a change made to comply with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Reimbursements requests may only be for expenditures that have already occurred or will occur within 3 business days of the receipt of funds, no longer by the last calendar day of the month in which the request was made. For Policy and Regulation 7440, which is school district security, which is also revised and is mandated. There was a change made to comply with Alyssa's law, which was approved on February 6, 2019, and it requires school districts to equip each public elementary and secondary school building with at least one panic alarm, a school security system. The law mandates this panic alarm security system be directly linked to a local law enforcement authorities capable of transmitting a single signal or message to the authorities. It will not be audible within the school building. So Policy and Regulations 8600, which is student transportation, which is, let me see, it's revised, and the policy is mandated, but the regulation is new and it's recommended. Changes due to new laws regarding safety specifications for buses manufactured 180 days after August 25th, 2018, and other new federal regulations regarding school bus operations. The policy requires every bus to display signs or legends which will inform other drivers of the law with respect to passing a bus while it's loading or unloading. The policy requires signage on the rear of all school buses providing school district contact information to the public for reporting misconduct by the bus driver while he or she is operating the school bus to school district officials. The mandated contact information needs to be for the school district or non-public school for which the school bus provides transportation. And this is Policy and Regulation 8630. They have 2 different names. So the policy is bus driver and bus aid responsibility, which is revised and mandated. And then the regulation is emergency school bus procedures, which is also revised and mandated. The changes are due to new laws. The policy requires a safety education program to be administered twice per calendar year for school bus drivers and school bus aides. Drivers over a certain age limit must submit to a medical exam and screening to be employed. Boards must provide a statement to the New Jersey Department of Education that a driver is no longer operating a school bus for the board within 24 hours of the board's receiving notice that a driver's license has been suspended or revoked. Policy 8670 is transportation of special needs students, which was revised and also mandated. And the policy is it's updated, changing disabled to special needs when referring to a student with disabilities. And then Policy 9210, which is parent organizations, it was revised and it's recommended. Strauss Esme, who write these policies for us. They recommend to clarify language in this policy about how parent organizations must get approval for any events with a written application to the superintendent or his or her designate. The board maintains that it shall not interfere with the inner workings of parent groups. And then policy 9400, which is media relations, was revised and is also recommended. Strauss recommended language to clarify this policy such that school district staff is not prohibited from talking to the media on their own behalf as a private citizen according to their First Amendment rights, provided that the staff member is clear that their statements are not that of a private citizen and not as a representative of the board. So that's all the first readings. Now, we're going to go back, have a little discussion. And so policy 2422 is the health and physical education, and it's, I think there's an M mandatory, and then it's implementation of daily recess for K through 5 students. So students in K through 5, they cannot be denied recess for more than twice per week for any code of conduct violations. So that means that this part of the policy may cause some changes in disciplinary practices at the grammar schools. If they use, if the kid's misbehaving and they sit them during recess, they're going to have to, it can only be done, it can't be done more than twice per week. And then the last discussion was policy 0155, which is the board committees. So I'll read this out and then we can talk about board forum after. Is that, I think that's what, right, Robin? Ms. McKeown, you want to talk about, I'm going to read about the board committees policy and then we can talk about board forum. We can talk about it here.
We can talk about it. I think it's a little premature to talk about some of it until we know, like for January with, which board members are going to be available for which stuff. But go ahead and report out.
Yeah, report out what we talked about. So the policy states that no more than 3 or 4 Board of Ed members shall be at each committee, on each committee. Our discussion was regarding the lowering the number of board members on each committee from 4 to 3. There would be no need to change the policy, but it would be necessary to change the corresponding regulation, which requires at least 4 board members on each committee. The discussion was in light of the large number of meetings that Board of Ed members have on their schedules, as well as the addition of the BT Connect we were talking about. This change will also give board members not on a particular committee the opportunity to attend committee meetings without violating the quorum rule. But the committee meeting would have 3 standing members and 2 alternates each committee. The 4th seat can be filled by any board member interested in attending. They may be an alternate to the committee or any other Board of Ed member with the approval of the committee chair on a first-come, first-served basis. Some of the language of the regulation would be needed to effectuate this ideas and should be the Board of Ed be in agreement with making them. So this is just a discussion talking about trying to streamline a little bit, but that's for later on to talk about. And that's everything for policy.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? I'll make one comment because I wasn't at the policy committee meeting, but when we originally were talking about it, I was thinking of a different idea of rotating for the 4th spot, having 2 different people sharing the spot. So I think there was some confusion among different board members of what exactly we were discussing at the meeting. So I think we need to have a further conversation about it, but maybe we want to wait on that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
We'll talk about it because we've been having a lot of discussions about how board members are going to participate in Burners Connect, and there's lots of opportunities, and some of it overlaps with some of the committees. So I think there's a lot of discussion that we could have about how the board's functioning as we figure out how Burners Connect is going to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just preliminary and trying to.
Right, yeah. Because we don't know yet exactly what the different strands are going to look like and when they're going to meet and stuff like that. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or comments before we vote? Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Byrne?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. We're up to the curriculum committee. There's one item. Would someone like to make a motion? Mrs. White, and someone second. Mrs. Wooldridge, do you have a report?
Do you want to vote first?
Just go ahead and do the report.
The first item, the Board of Ed Curriculum Committee met on September 6th. The first item was a discussion of a new requirement from the state.
Check with Nick, but I don't think so.
Oh, I just want to make sure okay. This past December, Governor Murphy and the State Assembly passed Bill number 1335. This bill states, and I quote, "Each Board of Education is required to provide instruction on the political, economic, and social contributions of persons with disabilities and lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people in an appropriate place in the curriculum of middle school and high school students as part of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards." End quote. This requirement takes effect for the 2021, sorry, it's harder to say than you think, school year. In anticipation of this requirement, the administration considered participating in a pilot of curriculum materials that were developed by the Garden State Equality and Make It Better for Youth organization. Their intent was to help districts meet this upcoming mandate. After evaluating the pilot, it was determined this requirement to participate were too onerous for our district at this time. That said, staff will begin to look at our curriculum and consider professional development in order to prepare for the new requirement for the next school year. The next item was the Ridge High School health curriculum update. Mr. Shallow and Ms. Clark presented an overview of the high school health curriculum changes. This summer, a complete review of all Ridge High School health lessons and instructional materials was conducted by Mr. Shallow, health teachers, and members of the counseling department, including the student assistance counselors. The rewrite included the addition of 3 weeks of curriculum for 10th grade, review and adjustment of scope and sequence for grades 9, 11, and 12, connecting counseling staff with curriculum in mental health, suicide prevention, and drug and alcohol awareness, creation of a skill-based pilot focusing on life skills, interpersonal communication, accessing information, and analyzing influences, as well as understanding essential health concepts to educate and empower students to live healthy lives, and building a health-specific team drive for sharing of assignments and instructional materials. The additional 3 weeks in 10th grade will cover the topics of drugs and alcohol, suicide prevention and awareness, and safe sex practices, contraceptives, and sexually transmitted infections. During focus groups led by Mr. Kraus last spring, students expressed interest in these specific topics. Students were also surveyed at the end of their health classes in the spring. The addition of the 3 weeks in 10th grade allowed for some much-needed expansion and resequencing of several topics in the other grades. Ms. Fox will be sending out a summary of all the new programming immediately following the first BT Connect meeting in early October. The team will continue working on the development of a staff and community survey to be sent out in the coming months. The next item was the textbook approval that's on our agenda for a vote. That's Conversations in American Literature for the Honors American Literature course. Next, we heard about the summer curriculum projects. The first was the math. There were several math curriculum writing projects. Mr. Colmer and members of the math staff made the following updates. Accelerated Math 6, it will be in year 2 this year. Employing the reflections on the first year of the course, updates and modifications were made to lessons. These modifications included scope and sequence improvements, pacing of the course, incorporation of SEL and technology standards. 7th grade math was also updated. Work was completed on the new non-accelerated course, which is now aligned exclusively with the New Jersey student learning standards for grade 7 only. The former 7th grade math, you may recall, included elements of the grade 8 standards that were essential for success in algebra in 8th grade. There were also updates to the accelerated math 7, including incorporation of math 7 cycle standards and some CUSAC compliance updates. Intermediate Algebra and Trigonometry B was updated. Last year was the first time this course was offered. Modifications were made based on reflections from students and staff on the first year. Cybersecurity and the Project Lead the Way path was also updated. Since last year was the first year this course was offered, again, reflecting on how that experience went for students, updates were made. AP Computer Science and Computer Science Principles were updated. The AP course is a Java course, and Computer Science Principles is a Project Lead the Way course. There was a significant reduction in student course requests for the Computer Science Principles this past, or whenever they made selections last spring. Efforts this summer focused on better aligning the two courses to offer a more cohesive computer science course for students electing to take the Principles course prior to the AP Computer Science course. In science, Mr. Misiak reviewed the summer projects, which included the beginning of it was the beginning, right, of the K-5 science program evaluation. They also reviewed the K-5 science assessments. Knowing Science is the current program employed in those grades, and it does not include standardized assessments, so summer work centered around developing formative assessments to be used across the district. K-5 information technology and digital literacy. Lessons for all 4 elementary schools were aligned to cover a total of 6 units. 3 will be technology and 3 will be media, which will spiral in all grades K through 5. The technology units will be digital citizenship, educational technology skills, and programming. The media units will be library citizenship, literature appreciation, and information literacy. And just one note about that, due to the reintroduction of the elementary world language program, the 4th and 5th grade will experience some reduction in total minutes. This situation will be closely monitored during this rollout year. Grades 6 to 8, information and digital literacy. The reduction in minutes in 4 and 5 necessitated a revision for realignment so that that content is included in grades 6 to 8, and they will use those same 6 areas of focus that I mentioned for grades 4 and 5. And in grades 9 and 12, a similar realignment took place. There was also a curriculum revision for biology. At all levels, honors criteria were adjusted to reduce stressors relating to math placement in grades 6 through 8. The honors course was altered and no longer aligns directly with the SAT subject test. All units in biology include a side-by-side comparison of the objectives across all 3 levels. Mr. Hunter spoke about the new course AP Research at the high school. The AP Research course is an interdisciplinary course that encourages students to demonstrate critical thinking and academic research skills on a topic of the student's choosing. That's right from the College Board. The course intends to build upon what the students learned in the first year course, AP Seminar, which was introduced at Ridge High School last school year. Work this summer focused on authoring detailed guidelines for the research process. Students must obtain permission to conduct their desired research. Once a topic is approved, the student will need to identify an expert advisor. There were guidelines relating to that. If an outside expert is necessary, there were strict guidelines authored that will be required to be adhered to. And the summer work also addressed the need for an instructional review board. Mr. Hunter also reported that currently there are 9 students taking this course. Because it is the first year, we'll watch that and see how it develops. Ms. Fox gave an update of the QUEST program. The new program is being rolled out this fall. Efforts to identify adjustments moving forward continue to be discussed. Accelerated math will be shifted to the math department instead of remaining with the QUEST. It is widely accepted that an accelerated math student may not, in fact, be a gifted student and vice versa, so that's the reason for the shift. For the school-wide enrichment model, there are 3 types of learning opportunities. Curricula were written for exploratory skill development, which is a cluster model, and individual small group activities. A curriculum map for advanced learning opportunities was also created. There was a quick update on platooning. The 5th grade teachers and Ms. Fox developed common structures for all 4 buildings. This includes school opening procedures, communication strategies, back to school night, and teacher conference formats, and the report card process. Mr. Fackelman reported on the summer financial literacy course. Mr. Fackelman reviewed all the results of the first run of this new course. The course is very challenging and intended for the very committed student who is prepared to work at an aggressive pace for 6 weeks. The course is run through Google Classroom, and staff can monitor individual students' work throughout the 6 weeks. General observations were that the students who let the work pile up had more difficulty than those who kept pace all along. There were 2 end-of-course test dates that were scheduled 1 week apart. This approach worked very well. The overall success rate of students was 94%. Of the 55 students originally enrolled, 50 finished the course and 47 passed. Participants will be surveyed for their feedback in the coming weeks. There were, planned adjustments for next year. Each student will have a pre-meeting with Mr. Fackelman and teachers to discuss the rigor of the course and to answer questions about timeline and vacations, etc. The course will be listed in Genesis. This will help with placement and positioning students for success, and the counseling department plans to incorporate conversation about this course and whether it meets the needs of the students requesting it. There was a brief discussion, that's funny. There's never a brief discussion on this topic, but I'll say it anyway. There was a brief discussion about chemistry. Little humor is always fun. And the unusually high number of sections of college prep conceptual chemistry this year. Concerns were expressed that after the struggles of the past 2 years with honors chemistry, some students have come to realize that if they take CP conceptual chemistry rather than the mathematical version of the course, they will receive the same grade point weighting for less rigorous coursework. This raised questions about whether this would have a negative impact on students who are appropriately placed in the conceptual course. Mr. Misiak reported that there are currently 7 sections of this course, 4 of which have an in-class support teacher. The remaining do not. Both biology and physics only have 1 additional section above those that include an ICS teacher. Over the past few years, efforts have been made to create a less restrictive course selection process. Along with these efforts, the science department is giving consideration to changes in course names, leveling, and/or weighting, and this will be monitored throughout the year. You already heard about Berners Township Connect. And the last item was the senior internship program, which there are two paths to, and they were combined. One was the existing senior internship program, which allows a senior student to leave the high school building at the end of the day with scheduled to go to either one of our school buildings to work with one of our district staff or to some other professional in the community. And the other path is through the newly created May-June senior internship program that Mr. Brum actually spoke to the community about last spring, which was an enormous success. The next meeting is October 4th. Thank you for your patience. Yes, we do. So I guess we need,
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Any questions?
I just have the question about the Quest program and kids getting into it. The 2 paths, right? So for kids to be eligible for Quest or get accepted into the Quest program, there's 2 paths, right? One is testing in, and the other one is parent nomination, which includes testing. So just anecdotally, I've been hearing some confusion about parents understanding the parent nomination process, when that's supposed to be done, what sort of response is given, and then how that relates to the 3 times a year testing program. So
that's a lot. I'll see what I can remember, and you can just tell me what I forgot. But
let's start with parent
the
nominations.
nomination process is not exactly as you described. So students can be nominated for, all students were looked at. Students could be
When?
Last spring. We looked at the students in grades 2, 3, and 4 who were rising into grades 3, 4, and 5.
So
this
every
year-
spring we look at,
That's the
Okay.
plan. I
Okay.
mean, this is new, right? That was our first implementation of this new program.
yes.
Previously, it was accelerated math, and there was a totally different process.
So
for that.
so every spring, all the students will be looked at in second, third, and fourth.
Correct.
And then if the student qualifies for Quest, they will be notified, but otherwise there will be no notification.
Everyone, so like I said, everybody is looked at, and they can be then considered nominated through either their test scores, so we'll look at all of the test scores on the test that that are in the criteria. So that's a nomination process as well. So even if a teacher or a parent doesn't nominate a student, they can end up in the nominated pool just by their performance on these test scores.
Okay.
Or they can be nominated by a parent or a teacher, any one of those three vehicles. And then those students that are considered nominated are considered as part of the identification process.
But
where
only in the spring.
for grades, going into grades 3,
So if
4,
you're a
and 5.
parent and you nominate your son or daughter in the fall, that is tabled until they just go into the
I
pool?
mean, so a couple things. Obviously, for new students, we're going to look at them this fall. Students who are new to the district,
Right.
we are looking at them. And no, there's no formal evaluation process, but what we kind of said when we publicly presented was, we want students to be in the right place. So certainly, if there was a student who was misplaced as part of that process, we wouldn't hold them back for an entire year. But the intention is that because we're being thorough in the nomination process, we're hoping we don't miss anyone. So no, there won't be another formal nomination process, but we would always be looking at students being in the right place, if that makes sense. So there's no formal procedure outside of once a year, but part of the new program in providing opportunities for kids at all levels, right, not just the identified students, means we'll have a better understanding of kids and their learning. And so it's not out of the question that a student mid-year could seem like they would be better placed as an identified student.
So is it possible, and what would happen if a parent nominated their son or daughter in
Well,
the fall,
right.
in the winter, and then in the spring?
There won't be a parent nomination process throughout the year, not a rolling nomination process by parents or students, but an awareness through the Renzulli learning system, through the information we have about students participating in Type 1 and Type 2, that we as a team, right, we call it the Quest team, would look at students if it became obvious, not through a formal nomination process, but through communication with the teacher and with parents that a student should be considered. I don't want to make it seem like we're not going to ever look at a student for an entire year if they really should be, but it's not a constant rolling admission process either, really. So just from a procedural standpoint, it's every spring
So what
for
would
the
we tell,
next year.
what should we tell parents about
Like right
when
now?
to nominate their,
Call the principal. I mean, but in the spring. So we would send out.
so in the spring, okay.
We would publish the criteria in the winter,
Excuse me?
February. We would publish the process in the winter
Okay,
and take nominations in March.
okay. So if a parent writes a nomination in, will they always hear yes or no, or only yes?
Everybody who sent in a nomination
Okay.
was
All right.
notified in July over
Okay.
the summer.
But not everybody in the nomination pool will hear yes or no, because it's all the students.
Everybody who was nominated by a parent
Will hear yes or no?
was notified,
Okay,
yes.
got it.
You have a question, Jen?
Any other questions?
When you were talking about the AP research, it has 9 students, which is, I don't even know if we have like a,
Well, let me just say this, though, there were, was it 15? 14 that initially requested the course, and then I think because of scheduling conflicts and getting everything in that they needed, it's a singleton, so it can only be
so
at
you
one time.
you had to take AP seminar before?
Yes,
So how many kids took AP seminar?
14?
So that's not huge either.
But that was
Right.
the first year.
Okay. I'm just curious as to how many people wanted to do it.
And I think we had, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I think we did have numbers for how many students requested. That would have been 2 years ago. How many, or 2 springs ago, requested AP seminar versus how many were actually able to work it into their schedule.
Right, well, yes,
Do they
because,
have
the
to-
schedule is all big.
Do they have to pass a certain AP grade score, the AP seminar, to proceed to research?
I don't think we had anyone that didn't qualify,
I
right?
don't have it in front of me, but there is AP criteria for the course.
The documentation
second one.
is extensive.
Do they have to take the AP seminar exam?
Yes.
Not to take,
Is there an exam, an AP?
I thought that was part of what,
I'd have to actually look.
It's in the massive amount of documentation that's in the link for the AP research.
I just noted how expensive the AP exam for AP seminar and AP research was. To register for that class, it was $147, I think.
Maybe
was
that's
a
part of
lot.
the reason.
I know, but it might also be
Might be a
discouraging
deterrent.
people.
Yeah, it might be.
I bet they didn't even know when they picked the
So if
course.
you, yeah.
What?
I bet they didn't even know what the cost of the exam is when they picked the course.
Maybe not.
I just worry that if a kid says, you know what, I'm not doing that for $147 on AP seminar, which is not really going to get me too much in credit from college, then can they not proceed to AP research?
Right.
That was just a question.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
I want to, but
That's it?
No?
Yeah, we still need to vote.
Yeah, do we have a motion for this? I thought we did. No? No?
No.
need to vote on that.
Okay, I could have sworn we did that already. Okay, a motion for item 1. Okay, Karen and then Linda was second, and then we need a roll call.
Mr. Byrne? Okay. Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Korn?
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Madam President?
Before we go on to the next item, I'd just like to go back to policy for a second. A question has come up as to whether the policy item was properly moved and seconded on the readings, the first reading of those items. So unless anyone can specifically remember doing that, I'd like to now call for a volunteer to move and second those items. But, you have Ms. You have your choice.
Jen and Jen.
Jen and Jen both raised their hands, so that's fine. And I'm comfortable that there was an opportunity to discuss that item, and there was obviously a formal vote was taken. And also, because this is only the first reading, and there will be another attempt to vote again, another requirement to vote for the second reading. So unless anyone objects, any of the board members object, I don't think it's necessary to do the roll call again. So if there are no objections, I think we're cool.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're up to advocacy.
Advocacy met on September 9th. It was our first committee meeting of the new school year. All the PTO presidents, and there were a number of new ones, introduced themselves, shared the school that they represented, and told a little bit about themselves. We then had a discussion about what the role of the advocacy committee is, as we've had many new members, and we discussed how advocacy has changed over time. Initially, it was one of the only ways to share information with PTO presidents, who then would share out with their schools. But now, with social media like Twitter, the weekly SOS, and even Facebook, it's much easier to keep the school community in the loop and informed about events and happenings in the district. Although it does remain a goal that through advocacy, the lines of communication will be kept open between all district PTOs as well as the PEC. During the discussion about the role of advocacy, Ms. Fox shared the thought process involved in the creation of the Berners Township Schools Connect. And she explained the what and the hows of how it will work. But since we just had a very extensive presentation on it, I won't share it because it's the exact same information that you already have heard. But we discussed that advocacy ties in nicely with Connect, and we're hoping to have members of advocacy on the committee so that members, PTO presidents themselves may be the members and members of Connect. As we expect that these presidents will be participating on the council, we also decided that the months that advocacy members are attending the Connect council meetings, that will take place in lieu of the regular advocacy committee meetings. So we have a new schedule for our meetings. So the typical November meeting that we would have had for advocacy we won't be having because we'll be having Connect, and we'll keep that consistently throughout the year. PTO presidents are currently in the midst of planning their meetings and their presentations for the school year. When possible, schools will link up presentations that are relevant with each other. For example, Mount Prospect will be hosting a tech tutorial for parents on September 24th. Information that's going to be covered is how to use the A to Z directory, information on Genesis, school books, and the Remind for bus information. While the meeting is being held at Mount Prospect, the information is relevant to all elementary parents and all are welcome. Mr. Markarian also shared with everyone a listing of all district-wide meetings and how they can be found on the Board of Ed website. Meetings are actually listed in 2 different locations. One is on the DynaCal calendar. The other is on the left-hand side of the home page. There's a tab that says Parents, and you simply click that, and it brings you to another tab with the presentations. And a list of all the presentations for the 2019-20 school year can be found. We've reminded the PTO presidents it's really important to let principals know of any events that they are planning so that they get on the calendar, and as well so that they receive Board of Ed approval when necessary. We discussed the upcoming election. There are 5 candidates running for 3 open positions, and a candidates night is being worked on with the League of Women's Voters. There will, at the time that more information will be coming about the date, which is set for October. I'm not sure, October 17th? Okay. And I'm sure more information will be coming out about that. We also were given a report on the opening of school. Mr. Markarian shared that the initial feedback from people is that they like Genesis, but we're still on a learning curve, so every once in a while an email may go out that is not working, and then you might get a second email with the information that didn't come out in the first email. We were given an update of enrollment. There are 5,137 district students this year, 1,829 at Ridge, 1,282 at William Annan, 550 at Cedar Hill, 420 at Liberty Corner and Oak Street, and 530 at Mount Prospect. But this was 2 weeks ago, so perhaps there are new students by now. The planning board is still trying to figure out how much building is going to be taking place near Mountain Avenue. We hope our demographer might be able to give us an update of the numbers, even if it's a rough estimate based on the information that we've been provided with so far. We talked about vaping sensors and the possibility of having them in the bathrooms. They work like smoke or carbon monoxide detectors, but a sensor can cost anywhere between $750 and $1,000 each, so it's important to actually find out how and if they work before that kind of expenditure. Lastly, a question was raised about what the protocol is for any concerns in regards to situations that might arise on the bus, and the answer is the same for all the schools, at all schools, to please start by contacting your principal with any issues. The next advocacy meeting will be November 4th, as the Connect Council meeting will be on October 15th.
Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, thank you. We're up to SEL, which I think is meeting, right?
SEL is meeting on Thursday.
Okay.
I have nothing else to report out.
Okay, thank you. Any liaison reports? Okay, we're now up to public comment on non-agenda items. If anyone has any comments or questions from the public, tell us your name and address when you come up and sign in on the clipboard afterwards. Oh, I don't remember a meeting with no public comment. Okay, I guess I'll close public comment. We're up to board forum now. Did anyone have anything for board forum? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I listened to a podcast from NJ School Boards about start times, later start times that Nick had sent out. And it was about from the superintendent and principal at Princeton High School. It was really interesting. So 3 just minor topics that they discussed was transportation and extracurriculars were kind of like the keys to making this work. in particular on extracurricular was talking to schools about obviously scheduling later start times, but one of the things that they had an issue with was going to schools, and Princeton too, that don't have lighted fields. So that was something where they had to try to figure out how can we start games a little bit later but still get them in on fields that don't have lights, which I didn't foresee, but that was interesting. One of the kind of upshots of running the later buses was traffic. So something that neither the superintendent nor the principal really foresaw coming was kind of moving people around through the town. The last thing that I thought was really interesting was there was a study, because I think there's some hesitancy or some, and it's an intuitive thought that if you let kids sleep later, they will stay up later. But then there was a study that like kind of high school age kids, and maybe Jimmy could talk to this, but like they kind of go to bed at like 11 o'clock or so based on circadian rhythms or something. So like even if you start the school day later, they should get tired around that time anyway, every day. And so they bumped the school day back, I think 24, 30 minutes or something, and they saw benefit from that now. And they also, which was interesting, they also implemented it, I think, the same year that they went to an alternative schedule, a rotating drop. So just a very kind of analogous circumstance and an interesting discussion. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because I think I think everybody stipulates that more sleep is good. It's just how do you make it work, So interesting podcast.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the traffic thing ever since you mentioned that to me, because certain times of day when I'm driving in different parts of town, even when the elementary schools are going over by, I'm thinking about the new construction on Mountain Road and by Dewey Meadows and how it's just going to get worse because both of those areas are completely backed up for a long stretch in the morning. And so it's a little bit different time than the traffic is here at Ridge, but it could be interesting. I don't know if there's any way to do a traffic study to figure out.
Well, that was one thing they were talking about, because I wouldn't think of this, but they involved the police department in the planning to help with alleviating traffic concerns.
It was better or?
No, it got worse, because
got
you're running
worse.
buses all at the same time, the elementary
Right,
school, the
right,
middle
yeah.
school, and the high schools,
Yeah.
all going.
Right.
And the other kind of twist that Princeton had was that they take students from Cranberry, because Cranberry does not have a high school. So they had to get Cranberry on board with this as well, and the busing for the other towns. So they had another layer to it. But again, involving the police department, which is something that I wouldn't, at least when I was thinking about it, didn't come to mind. So it's interesting.
One thing, I can't remember which committees have had this conversation, it might have been SEL, but one thing that's come up in the conversation about the athletics piece of that was with the rotating drop. If you, right now, swim team members, they leave school early because they have one slot at the Y that they can swim during. So if you have a rotating schedule, if you have to leave early on those days when you have to go play in Phillipsburg, say, or wherever, and it's a longer trip, and that you would not be missing the same class, which is what happens now for the athletes who have to leave early. Their ninth period class is always the class that is sacrificed.
Yeah, they also said, and I couldn't really understand what they were talking about because it was kind of jumbled, but they did build in a study hall or something like that. So it was also that the study hall was sometimes being missed or something like that at points. So
Yeah, if it's rotating.
right, for the rotation. Yeah. So it was interesting.
The busing will be affected too, I think, the cost, because instead of having 3 routes on the same bus, you're probably only going to have 2 or 1. So the busing cost is going to increase.
Yeah, so right now, we don't have triple tiering anyway. We just have 2, and in the schedules I asked transportation to look at, I kept it that way to try to keep it 2 tiers so that we wouldn't lose that efficiency. So we'll see how that plays out, see what they think that they can do. But no, I think it would be a challenge for us if we tried to do 1 tier. You'd have, all 3 schools at the same time, and you wouldn't even be able to get drivers.
No.
Because you'd have to get more buses on the road at the same time. You're not going to get the drivers even if you want to do that. So I don't think that's an option.
Did you have something?
This is different than the podcast, but I was just thinking about the presentation of Connect, which had such important information, and the Pride presentation. And I look out, and these are 2 topics that we've had a lot of feedback from last year through the spring from parents that, they want information before decisions are made, they want to be included in conversations. And we've just had an entire meeting where there were 2 presentations on topics that directly affect the students that parents want information on. And it's disheartening to look out, and these parents who were not, who were here last spring, very concerned, aren't here to hear what has been done to address a lot of the concerns, which I guess also makes me worry in terms of the connect of how do we get, it's like, Field of Dreams. If you build it, will they come? Like, they're not coming when we're having these presentations on the exact topics that they've clamored to be included on. So now we're going to have more, which is so needed, but I guess how are we going to get the people to come?
Hopefully, the different time of day may draw out a different crowd of parents.
And hopefully we'll get a lot of staff and students to participate on some of the topics, that directly affect them. But we'll have to see who comes, but.
Nick, you couldn't send it out in the SOS Expresses Week, the links to those reports too?
Yeah, I could do that. I think I mentioned that we were doing these reports in my message on Friday.
You did, but.
So now I can send the link.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
It's not from lack of announcing it, though. That's like, it goes out in the and I know people are busy. I get it,
This
but
time
it
of year is
just
a little hard, this time of year.
it's
but-
hard because
Well, people are looking to the media for their information, right, in this town?
Although, as Kristen pointed out, you can send it out 17 ways, and it's the 18th one that's the missing one.
I think the Pride survey should have follow-up meetings with the parents, independent meetings to talk about, as well as by school, not just a presentation, but what are we going to do to try and fix it? And I think you're going to need additional meetings, not at the board level, but to try and involve the parents and see whether we can reduce some of those.
I think the hope is to try to create an environment maybe more conducive to just talking. That's kind of what we're trying to do with the structure of the town hall meetings, to just kind of talk. Maybe we need more coffee and cookies or something. That might help, I don't know.
Well, I was talking about the marijuana.
No, but I mean, in terms of those meetings, we have opportunities to talk about a lot of different health items and, things directly related to data that we're collecting, like the data in the Pride survey, and to talk to parents about, hey, this is what the survey is saying. We need to collaborate on these issues. So I'm hoping that maybe that kind of format might inspire more attendance, and we can get more traction when we share the information. So we'll see if that plays out. We had pretty good turnout when we had sort of an open call for the strategic planning meeting. So I'm hoping if we kind of play these town hall meetings up to be the same sort of thing, like we want to hear from you and we want to share what we're thinking, hopefully we'll get good traction. We'll see.
That would qualify as my additional meetings as well, so that sounds fine.
I don't know, did you want to talk about the committees, or did you want to table that till next time, or wait till?
Sorry, my mic was off. What do you guys think? Yeah, your mic's not on.
I was saying I think we have some unknowns, so it might be better.
To wait?
Yeah.
That's fine, I mean, I have no, there's no
I'm just
decisions
one
being made.
opinion.
Right.
I don't know if
We're going
everybody else wants.
to operate
I
just
think
how we've been.
maybe the different committees can also discuss at their committee, like I know advocacy had a whole discussion about the purpose and format of advocacy. I think SEL, as it's evolved, it may be time for a conversation there, because that was an ad hoc committee, which now is sort of getting morphed into some of the connect things. So maybe, we can talk in the committees and then regroup as a whole board.
There's so many people clamoring to come to policy that, it's probably the meeting to talk about it.
I actually like going to policy. I used to love policy.
I thought our conversation of policy really was around the number of people on committees, not what they were addressing or doing.
Right.
So
I
that
think
was
there's
the-
two,
I will tell
there's
you,
two
I'm-
conversations. One is like, there's lots of meetings, which is partly
Yeah.
because we have 6 committees instead of 5, which we had for a long time, and we've done the strategic plan, and we're doing Connect. So there is a lot of meetings, because we didn't always have 6 committees, and we didn't always have Connect or strategic plan
I do
meetings,
think we need to
too.
continue the conversation.
Yeah,
though.
but I think there's
don't
other-
agree with
Yeah.
having 3 people on a
Yeah, there's
committee.
different
That's
issues
fine,
with certain
just don't-
committees that we have to talk about.
Well, I think the spirit of the original request
Yeah.
to have policy look at it was to observe that we're going to have some turnover on the board. We've had turnover over the last several years, and so there's board members that have not served on certain committees yet, and that there's like a learning curve. And so the opportunity to maybe, instead of being at the same committee meeting every single month, to maybe be at a different one where you can learn something different or observe something different or add something that only you can bring to the conversation
That's fine, just.
was one of the things that came
Right.
up.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
agree
fair
with
to
that.
say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think from policy perspective, we determined though that it's not a policy change, no matter what we decide as far as the numbers.
Right.
It was in regulation that we had to change something,
Right.
but
Nothing's
the
gonna change it.
composition and the numbers of meetings and stuff is really not policy. Is it?
Right. I mean, we would have to look at the regulation if we made a change.
Well, it is
but
a
yeah.
policy, though.
The
I mean,
policy
it's
is
a
3 or
policy.
4.
Right,
The regulation is 4.
right. Yeah, we would have to, if we changed the committees, the names of them or something, we have to change the policy. But yeah.
And I want to talk about committees, but not tonight. I'm going to save that for maybe my last meeting.
Your finale,
Okay,
your finale,
yeah.
your swan song.
Now we'll be waiting.
And everyone
waiting for-
can cheer.
Yeah, okay. Aw. Okay, anyone else have anything for board forum? No? Does somebody want to make a motion for adjournment? Mr. Salmon and Mrs. Korn. Is that all in favor?
Aye.